Maya Collins pushed through the thick alien. Grass's purple lightning split the sky above her head. The plasma storm had come from nowhere, and now she was lost on this strange world. Called Keleth Prime, her radio crackled with static, and she could not reach her team back at the research station. The wind howled around her, and the air tasted like metal. The storm clouds above her were not normal clouds but swirling masses of energy that made her skin tingle in a bad way. She needed shelter, fast, or the electromagnetic pulses would fry her equipment, and maybe her Maya spotted dark shapes ahead that looked like rocks, or maybe caves. She ran toward them as the storm grew worse behind her. The ground under her feet was covered with strange crystal formations that glowed faintly in the weird light from the storm. These crystals were why she had come out here in the first place, to study them for her research. She reached the rocks and found they were indeed caves carved into a hillside. The entrance was large enough for her to walk through, and she hurried inside, just as another blast of energy lit up the sky. The cave was deeper than she expected, and the walls were lined with more of those glowing crystals. Maya pulled out her flashlight and moved deeper into the cave system. The storm sounds became muffled here, and she felt safer. But as she walked further in, she heard something else. Something that sounded like breathing, but much too large to be from any animal. She knew about. She followed the sound around a bend in the cave, and her flashlight beam fell on something impossible. A massive creature lay on the cave floor. Its body was as long as 3 cars put together, and covered in scales that shifted from silver to deep blue even in the dim light. 2 huge wings were folded against its sides. But one wing had terrible tears in the thin membrane between the wing bones. Maya knew what this was from her studies. A worm, one of the dragon-like creatures that were supposed to be extinct. The creature was breathing, but each breath was shallow and painful. A large piece of storm glass had pierced its side, and dark blood pooled beneath it. Though Wyrm sensed her presence and lifted its great head eyes, like molten gold, fixed on her, and Maya felt a chill of fear. The creature could kill her with one snap of its jaws, but something in those ancient eyes stopped her from running. It was not anger she saw there, but pain and a strange kind of hope. Maya approached slowly with her hands visible. The worm watched her every move, but did not attack. She could see now that the creature was badly hurt. The storm glass had gone deep, and there were other cuts and burns across its scales from the electrical storm outside. Without thinking about the danger, Maya knelt beside the massive head. The worm rumbled deep in its throat, but the sound was not threatening. It was more like a question. Maya reached into her pack and pulled out her medical kit. She had supplies meant for humans, but maybe some of them would work on this creature too. She spoke softly to the worm as she worked, even though she did not think it could understand her words. The tone seemed to calm the great beast. Maya cleaned the wounds with antiseptic, and the worm flinched, but held still. She had to use all her strength to pull the storm glass from its side, and the creature made a sound like a steam engine, releasing pressure. The bleeding was bad, but Maya had surgical thread. In her kit she had learned to stitch wounds during her field training, and now she used those skills on scales instead of skin. The worm watched her work with those golden eyes, and Maya felt like it was judging whether she could be passed. As Maya worked on the creature, she used most of her medical supplies, and even tore strips from her own clothing to make bandages. The worm lay still through all of it, though. She could tell it was in great pain. She shared her water and emergency food with the creature, and it accepted both with surprising gentleness. As dawn light began to filter into the cave, the storm outside finally died away. Maya was exhausted, but the worm looked much better. Its breathing was deeper and stronger. The golden eyes that watched her now held something different, something that might have been gratitude. The creature struggled to its feet, and Maya stepped back to give it room. It was even more magnificent when standing. The head reached almost to the cave ceiling, and the wingspan would be enormous when fully extended. The worm looked down at Maya for a long moment, then did something unexpected. It lowered its great head until it was level with hers, and pressed its forehead against Maya's forehead. Maya felt a strange tingling sensation, and heard words that were not spoken aloud, but seemed to form directly in her mind. The words were in a language she did not know, but somehow she understood their meaning. The worm was telling her its name. Zorith, it was also doing something else, something that felt like a ceremony. Maya felt warmth flow through her body, starting where their foreheads touched. The feeling was not unpleasant, but it was definitely not normal either. When Zoroth lifted his head, Maya felt different somehow, more aware of everything around her. She could hear the cave crystals humming with energy and smell scents that had been too faint to notice before. The world seemed brighter and more alive than it had been. Before Zorith spoke to her mind once more, this time the meaning was clearer. He was thanking her, but also telling her that what had just happened was important, that it would change things in ways she could not yet understand. He called her something that translated roughly as sister of the Talon. The great worm moved toward the cave entrance, moving carefully to avoid reopening his wounds. Maya followed and watched as he emerged into the morning sunlight. His scales caught the light and threw back rainbow colors that took her breath away. Wrath looked back at her one more time, then spread his wings. The movement must have hurt, but he did it anyway. With powerful beats of those massive wings, he lifted into the air and soared away toward the mountains. Maya watched until he was just a speck in the distance. She made her way back to the research station, following the signal from her GPS. The storm had moved on and left the landscape looking somehow cleaner. The other scientists were worried about her. Lisa Morgan and Kate Sullivan had been ready to send out search teams. Maya told them she had taken shelter in the caves during the storm. She did not mention Zoroth. She was not sure they would believe her, and something told her this was not the time to reveal what had happened. The mark on her forehead where Zoroth had touched her was invisible, but she could feel it like a warm spot that never cooled in. The days that followed, Maya noticed changes in herself. Her mind seemed sharper, and she could focus on complex problems for hours without getting tired. Plants in the research station greenhouse grew better when she tended them. The local wildlife that usually avoided humans now approached her without fear. Morgan commented that Maya seemed different, somehow more confident and commanding. Lisa could not put her finger on what had changed, but she noticed that people listened more carefully when Maya spoke during team meetings. Maya herself was aware of the changes, but did not understand them. She felt more connected to the world around her, and sometimes she thought she could sense emotions from other people. The feelings were faint, but definitely there. She wondered if this was connected to what Zoroth had done to her in the cave. 3 weeks after the storm, Maya was working in her lab when alarms began sounding throughout the station. Captain Amy Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom telling everyone to report to the main observatory. A ship had appeared in orbit around Calith. Maya joined the crowd of scientists and support staff gathering around the main viewing screen. The ship in orbit was unlike anything in the human fleet. It was sleek and predatory looking with curves that seemed almost organic. The hull had a metallic sheen that shifted colors like oil on water. Helen Carter, the diplomatic liaison, was already trying to establish contact with the unknown vessel. The response came quickly and in perfect English, though the voice had an unusual accent that made some words sound almost musical. The voice identified itself as Ambassador Tishra, representing the Draconic Confederation. She requested permission to land and asked to speak with the human who bore the mark of Zoroth. Maya felt her blood run cold. How could they possibly know about what had happened in the cave? Captain Rodriguez looked around the room until her eyes found Maya. Everyone else was looking confused, but Maya knew the aliens were here for her. Whatever Zoroth had done to her in that cave, it had not gone unnoticed by his people. Maya stepped forward, feeling like she was walking toward her destiny. She had saved a dying creature in a storm, and now it seemed that act of compassion was about to change everything. The landing shuttle that descended from the alien ship was a work of art. Maya watched from the observation deck as it settled onto the station landing pad with barely a whisper of sound. The craft looked like it had been grown rather than built, with smooth curves and no visible seams. Ambassador Tishra emerged from the shuttle, and Maya felt her breath catch. The alien was humanoid but clearly not human. Her skin was covered in fine golden scales that caught the light beautifully amber. Eyes with vertical pupils surveyed the welcoming committee with obvious intelligence. She wore robes that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. Captain Rodriguez led the formal greeting with Dr. Carter handling the diplomatic protocols. Maya hung back with the other scientists, but she could feel the ambassadors searching the crowd. Those amber eyes found her and locked on with an intensity that made Maya want to hide. The ambassador spoke with Captain Rodriguez for several minutes using the common trade language that most spacefaring species understood. Maya could not hear the conversation from where she stood, but she saw Rodriguez glance in her direction several times. Finally, the captain beckoned Maya forward. Maya approached, the group feeling like every eye was on her ambassador. Tishra studied her with obvious interest. When she spoke, her voice had that same musical quality Maya had heard over the communications system. The ambassador explained that Zoreth had sent word to his people about the human who had saved his life during the Great Storm. The news had traveled quickly through the draconic communication networks and had caused quite a stir among the various clans and houses. Maya learned that Zoreth was not just any Wyrm but the last surviving prince of an ancient royal bloodline, the House of Silver. Flame had ruled parts of the draconic territories for thousands of years before a great civil war had scattered the royal family. Zoreth had been thought dead for over 3 centuries. By saving Zoreth and accepting his monarch, Maya had become something unprecedented in draconic society. A Talon sister to a prince of the blood. The ambassador tried to explain what this meant, but the concepts did not translate well into human language. Dr. Carter asked many questions about the political implications, while Captain Rodriguez wanted to know about military matters. Maya just wanted to understand what had happened to her in that cave. The warm spot on her forehead seemed to pulse as she listened to the ambassador speak. Ambassador Tishra explained that the bond mark was both an honor and a responsibility. It meant that Maya was considered family by Zoreth and by extension had claims to status within draconic society. The exact nature of those claims would need to be determined by the various clan leaders as, if summoned by their conversation, more ships began appearing in the system. Maya watched the displays with growing amazement as vessel after vessel dropped out of hyperspace. The ships came in many different designs, but all had that same organic flowing look of draconic architecture. The first to land was commanded by Lady Vexstar, a fearsome-looking female with black scales and silver eyes. Her ship was clearly military with weapon pods visible along its hull. Lady Vexstar controlled 3 star systems on the outer rim and commanded respect even among other Dragonlord-eyed matriarch. Ish arrived next in a massive vessel that was more like a flying palace. Her silver scales marked her as nobility of the highest rank. Her clan controlled the major trade routes between human and alien space, making them incredibly wealthy and influentially. New arrival requested audience with Maya, and each seemed to represent a different faction within draconic society. The traditionalists wanted to test whether a human could truly understand draconic ways. The progressives saw Maya as a bridge between species. The military leaders wondered if she could be trusted with the secrets of draconic warfare. Maya felt overwhelmed by the attention and the responsibility. Captain Rodriguez and Dr. Carter did their best to manage the diplomatic chaos, but neither had experience with draconic customs. The station was not designed to handle so many high-ranking alien visitors. Admiral Grace Peterson arrived from Earth within days, bringing a full diplomatic team and military advisors. The human government was both excited and terrified by the implications of Maya bond with the dragons. Humanity had been trying to establish better relations with the draconic territories for decades. Without much success, Maya found herself at the center of negotiations. She did not understand. Representatives from both species spoke around her as if she was not there, making plans for her future without asking her opinion. She began to feel like a prize to be won rather than a person with her own choices. The pressure increased when Zoreth himself returned to Keleth Prime. His arrival caused a sensation among the gathered Dragonlords. Many had not seen a prince of the silver flame bloodline in centuries. Some knelt as he passed, while others watched with calculating. Shorth sought out Maya immediately, and their reunion was emotional. The great worm nuzzled her gently, and she felt the warmth of their bond strengthen. His presence calmed her nerves and reminded her that this had all started with a simple act of kindness through their mental connection. Sorath explained more about what the bond meant. He had not planned to mark her, but the ritual had activated itself responding to her selfless actions. The mark recognized her as worthy of the ancient bloodline regardless of her species. The draconic visitors were fascinated by the bond between human and worm. Some had never seen such a connection between different species. Others had heard legends of similar bonds in the distant past, but thought them mere stories. Lisa Morgan and Dr. Kate Sullivan helped Maya research the phenomenon using the station extensive database. They found references to interspecies bonds in the records of several alien cultures. Most described them as rare events that occurred when individuals showed extraordinary courage or compassion. Maya began experiencing strange dreams filled with images of vast star charts and ancient draconic cities. She could sense the emotions of the visiting Dragonlords when they were nearby, their respect mixed with curiosity, and in some cases, suspicion. Lady Vexstar challenged Maya directly during one formal dinner, asking how a soft human could possibly understand the harsh realities of draconic leadership. Maya responded by describing the difficult decisions she had made during her research career, including times when she had to choose between scientific discovery and protecting indigenous life forms. High Matriarch Ishandra was more subtle in her testing. She engaged Maya in long conversations about philosophy and ethics, probing to see if the human understood concepts of honor and duty. Maya found herself drawing on everything she had learned about different cultures during her travels. The other scientists on the station watched these interactions with amazement. Maya, who had always been quiet and focused on her research, was holding her own in conversations with beings who had ruled star systems for centuries. Captain Rodriguez received daily communications from Earth asking for updates on the situation. The human government wanted to know if Maya could be convinced to use her influence with the dragons to benefit humanity. Maya made it clear that she would not be any one political pawn. The tension came to a head when Lord Asgaroth arrived with a battle fleet the massive Dragonlord had refused to acknowledge Maya legitimacy and demanded the right to challenge her claim. His ship bristled with weapons, and his warriors were known for their ruthlessness. Ambassador Tishra explained that by draconic law, Asgaroth had the right to issue such a challenge. The trial would determine whether Maya was truly worthy of her bond with Zorath, or if it had been a mistake that needed to be corrected. Maya felt fear, but also determination. She had not asked for any of this, but she would not back down from a challenge. The bond with Zorath pulsed with warmth, and she knew the great worm would stand with her, no matter what came next. Dar Carter worked frantically to understand the legal implications while Admiral Peterson prepared for the possibility of military action. Maya spent her time learning more about draconic customs from Ambassador Tishra and the other visiting nobles. Zorath shared his own memories through their bond, showing Maya glimpses of the great civil war that had torn apart the draconic kingdoms. She saw the pride and honor that drove his people, but also the destructive feuds that had weakened them. The challenge was set for 1 week, hence giving Maya time to prepare. Lord Asgaroth made it clear that he expected a traditional combat trial, where strength and skill would determine the outcome. Maya knew she could not defeat a Dragonlord in physical combat. She was beginning to understand that there might be other options. The gathered Dragonlords watched and waited to see what the human would do. Some clearly expected her to fail and flee. Others seemed genuinely curious about what she might try. Maya herself was not sure what she would do, but she knew that running was not an option. The bond with Zorath had changed her in ways she was still discovering. Each day she felt stronger and more confident. The warm spot on her forehead had become a source of inner peace and clarity. She could sense things about people that she had never noticed before. As the day of the challenge approached, Maya realized that this was about more than just her own fate. The draconic kingdoms had been divided for centuries by old grudges and competing claims. If she could find a way to prove herself worthy, it might open the door to healing those ancient wounds. She had saved one dying Wyrm in a storm. Now she had the chance to help save an entire civilization. But first, she had to survive the trial that Lord Osgarath had demanded. The stakes could not be higher, and failure was not an option. Maya prepared herself for the greatest challenge of her life. Maya stood in the center of the great assembly hall that had been hastily constructed on Kelith Prime. Around her sat the most powerful Dragonlords in the galaxy. Their scales gleamed under the artificial lights, and their eyes watched her every movement. Lord Osgarath loomed before her, his dark scales making him look like a living shadow. Though trial by combat seemed impossible, Maya was human and small compared to these massive beings. One blow from Osgarath's claws would end her life instantly. But as she studied the assembled Dragonlords, Maya began to see something that gave her hope. They were not united in supporting Osgarath's challenge. Ambassador Tishra had explained the ancient laws that governed such trials. Physical combat was traditional, but not the only option available. Maya could invoke the right to choose a trial of worthiness instead. This would test her wisdom and leadership skills rather than her fighting ability. Maya stepped forward, and her voice carried clearly through the hall. She invoked the ancient rite, surprising many of the gathered Dragonlords. Osgarath snarled his displeasure, but even he could not deny the legitimacy of her choice. The law was clear and had been used by leaders throughout draconic history. The trial of worthiness would consist of 3 challenges. Maya would need to demonstrate her ability to solve problems that affected the draconic peoples. Her solutions would be judged by the assembled lords, and she would need to win the approval of at least 2/3 of them. The first challenge was presented by High Matriarch Ishandra. 2 of the major trade clans had been feuding for decades over shipping rights through a valuable star system. The dispute had cost both sides enormous amounts of money and had disrupted commerce throughout the region. Maya listened carefully as both sides presented their cases. The Red Claw clan claimed historical rights to the shipping lanes based on ancient treaties. The Silverwing clan argued that they had invested more in developing the infrastructure and deserved priority access. Traditional draconic justice would have favored the clan with the strongest military backing, but Maya saw a different solution. She proposed dividing the shipping lanes by time rather than space. Each clan would have exclusive access during certain periods, allowing both to profit without conflict. The proposal required careful scheduling and coordination, but it would actually increase the total capacity of the shipping lanes. Both clans would make more money than either could alone. Maya detailed the logistics and showed how the system could be expanded to other disputed regions. The assembled Dragonlords murmured among themselves. Many had not considered such a cooperative approach. The Red Claw and Silver Wing representatives studied the proposal carefully, then agreed to try it. High Matriarch Ishandra nodded her approval and marked the first challenge as passed. The second challenge came from Lady Vexstar and was far more serious. A plague had broken out on the draconic homeworld of Tysira. The disease affected only dragons and was spreading rapidly. The medical facilities were overwhelmed, and panic was setting in among the civilian population. Maya called upon her scientific training to analyze the information provided. The plague seemed to target the respiratory systems of dragons, making it difficult for them to breathe. The symptoms suggested a viral infection, but traditional treatments were not working. Working with Dr. Lisa Morgan and Dr. Kate Sullivan, who had been allowed to assist, Maya dove into the medical data. The breakthrough came when they realized the virus was actually engineered. It had been designed specifically to attack draconic biology. This revelation changed everything. Instead of a natural plague, they were dealing with biological warfare. Someone had deliberately created this weapon to harm the dragon peoples. Maya proposed a 2-pronged response, combining medical treatment with investigation into the source. The medical approach involved using human antiviral drugs that could be modified for draconic physiology. Maya outlined a treatment protocol that could be implemented immediately. The investigation required tracking down whoever had created the bioweapon Lord. Osgarath himself was impressed by the thoroughness of Maya. Analysis. Several other Dragonlords volunteered resources to implement her plan. The second challenge was marked as passed, with only a few dissenting voices. The third challenge was the most complex. A coalition of hostile alien forces had invaded draconic territory and captured a civilian colony. The invaders had demanded huge ransom payments and threatened to execute the hostages if attacked. Traditional draconic response would be immediate military assault. Maya studied the tactical situation with help from Admiral Peterson advisors. The enemy forces were well entrenched and had superior firepower. A direct assault would likely result in heavy casualties among both the rescue force and the hostages. Instead, Maya proposed a complex deception operation. Multiple small forces would create distractions while the main rescue team infiltrated the colony through underground tunnels. The operation would require precise timing and coordination between different clan forces. The plan was risky, but it offered the best chance of saving the hostages without massive bloodshed. Maya walked the assembled Dragonlords through every detail, showing how their different military specialties could work together. Lord Osgarath questioned several aspects of the plan, but Maya had anticipated his concerns. Her responses showed deep understanding of both draconic military doctrine and the psychology of the enemy forces. Even Osgarath grudgingly admitted the plan had merit. The vote was closer on the third challenge. Some Dragonlords preferred the direct approach, despite the risks, but Maya had done enough to win the required majority. The trial of worthiness was complete, and she had passed all three challenges. What happened next surprised everyone, including Maya. The assembled Dragonlords began discussing, not just accepting her bond with Zorath, but formally recognizing her as queen of the draconic peoples. The ancient laws provided for this possibility, but it had not been invoked in over 1,000 years. The dragon throne had been empty since the Great Civil War that scattered the royal bloodlines. Most Dragonlords had assumed it would remain so forever. But Maya's bond with the last Prince of Silver Flame had reawakened possibilities that many thought were gone forever. Ambassador Tishara explained that a human queen would be unprecedented, but not illegal. The ancient laws spoke of worthiness and wisdom, not species. Maya had demonstrated both in her handling of the challenges. The bond with Zorath provided the bloodline connection required. The debate among the Dragonlords was intense. Some embraced the idea of unification under a new queen, others worried about the implications of non-draconic leadership. Maya herself felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being proposed. Shared his thoughts through their mental connection. He believed Maya could be the leader his people needed. Someone who could see beyond the old grudges and power struggles that had divided the clans for so long. Her outsider perspective might be exactly what was required. The human delegation led by Admiral Peterson had mixed reactions. The potential alliance with the dragon peoples would give humanity enormous advantages in galactic politics. But they worried about losing influence over Maya if she became an alien. Queen Maya asked for time to consider the decision. The weight of responsibility was enormous. She would be taking on the leadership of a warrior culture that spanned dozens of star systems. The decisions she made would affect millions of lives. Dr. Rebecca Stone and Dr. Natalie Brooks helped Maya research the history of the Dragon Throne. The previous queens and kings had been absolute rulers, but they had also been bound by complex codes of honor and duty. The position was as much about service as it was about power. The more Maya learned, the more she understood that accepting the throne would mean giving up her old life completely. She would have to master draconic law and custom, learn to think like a ruler rather than a scientist. The personal cost would be enormous, but she also saw the potential benefits. A united draconic confederation could bring peace to regions that had known only war for centuries. The technological and cultural exchange between humans and dragons could benefit both species enormously. Maya spent hours in meditation, feeling the warmth of her bond with Zorath, and thinking about the path that had brought her here. A simple act of compassion in a storm had led to this moment, where she could change the course of galactic history. The decision came to her gradually, not as a sudden revelation, but as a growing certainty. She had the chance to help heal ancient wounds and bring different peoples together. The responsibility was frightening, but she could not turn away from it. Maya announced her decision to the assembled Dragonlords. She would accept the dragon throne if they would have her as their queen, but she would rule as a bridge between species, not as a conqueror. Her reign would be about cooperation and understanding. The formal vote was overwhelming in her favor. Even some of the traditionalists who had opposed her earlier cast their support behind the decision. Lord Asgarath himself knelt before her, acknowledging her worthiness to rule. The coronation would take place on Taishara, the ancient capital of the draconic homeworld. The ceremony would be the largest gathering of Dragonlords in over a millennium. Representatives from across the galaxy would attend to witness this historic moment. Maya felt the weight of the crown even before it was placed on her head. But she also felt the strength of her bond with Zorath, and the support of those who believed in her vision. The girl who had saved a dying Wyrm was about to become the Queen of Dragons. The ancient capital of Taishara was unlike anything Maya had ever seen. Massive towers carved from living crystals stretched toward the sky, while bridges of solidified light connected floating platforms. The architecture seemed to defy physics, but Maya was learning that dragon technology was far more advanced than humans had realized. Thousands of Dragonlords had gathered for the coronation ceremony. Representatives from every major clan and house filled the great amphitheater that had been built into the side of a mountain. The crowd was a sea of scales in every color imaginable, from deepest black to brilliant gold. Maya stood in the preparation chamber wearing robes that had belonged to queens of old. The fabric seemed to shimmer with inner fire and felt warm against her skin. Zorath waited beside her, his own scales polished to mirror brightness. The bond between them pulsed with calm energy. Ambassador Tishra explained the final details of the ceremony. Maya would need to speak the ancient words that bound a ruler to her people. The ceremony was conducted in the old draconic language, but Zorath would help her through their mental connection. The moment arrived and Maya walked into the amphitheater. The crowd fell silent as she approached the dragon throne. The ancient seat was carved from a single massive gem that seemed to hold starlight within its depths. Maya had studied the ceremony, but actually participating felt overwhelming. High Matriarch Ishandra conducted the ritual in her role as eldest of the noble houses. She spoke the words that had been used for thousands of years, asking the assembled lords if they would accept Maya as their queen. The response was a roar of approval that shook the mountain. Maya placed her hand on the crystal of binding and spoke the oath that made her queen. The words seemed to burn themselves into her memory as she promised to protect the draconic peoples and uphold their ancient laws. The crystal flared with brilliant light, and Maya felt power flow through her. The crown was simple compared to human royal regalia, just a band of platinum set with 3 small gems. But as it settled on her head, Maya felt the weight of history. The crown had been worn by rulers who had shaped the galaxy, and now that responsibility was hers. President Victoria Hayes and Ambassador Karen Foster represented humanity at the ceremony. Their presence showed that Earth supported Maya's new role, even though many humans were still uncertain about the implications. The alliance between humans and dragons would change everything. The celebration lasted for 3 days, but Maya had little time to enjoy it. Reports were coming in of new threats to the draconic territories. The Skarn hegemony had taken advantage of the recent upheavals to launch attacks on several border systems. Maya convened her first war council in the ancient strategy chamber beneath the palace. The room had holographic displays that could show entire star systems in perfect detail. The gathered military leaders represented centuries of combat experience. Fleet Admiral Diana Roberts had been assigned as liaison between human and draconic forces. Agent Melissa Gray provided intelligence about enemy movements. The combination of human technology and draconic Knowledge was proving very effective. The Skarn forces were using hit-and-run tactics, striking civilian targets then retreating before draconic fleets could respond. Traditional Dragon's strategy would be to pursue them with overwhelming force, but Maya saw problems with that approach. That Skarn ships were faster than most draconic vessels, and they knew the local space better. A direct pursuit would probably fail, and might leave other systems vulnerable to attack. Maya needed a different strategy that played to her force's strengths. Working with War Chief Corthanis, Maya developed a plan that used multiple small fleets to herd the Skarn forces toward predetermined ambush points. The strategy required careful coordination, but it offered the best chance of stopping the raids. Some of the older Dragonlords objected to the complexity of the plan. They preferred the direct approach that had served them well in the past, but Maya had learned enough about draconic history to point out that traditional tactics had not prevented the civil warlord Osgaroth surprised everyone by supporting Maya's strategy. He had become one of her strongest allies after witnessing her performance during the trials. His military experience helped refine the tactical details of the operation. The first test of Maya leadership came when the Skarn attacked a colony world called Vorthtile. The planet had a population of over 2 million dragons, mostly civilians, who worked in the orbital manufacturing facilities. Maya had to make a choice between sending immediate help that might fall into a trap or waiting for her coordinated response to be ready. The delay could cost lives, but a failed rescue would be even worse. She chose to trust her strategy and wait for all the pieces to be in place. The decision was agonizing, especially when reports came in of the colony defenses failing. Maya felt the weight of every life that might be lost because of her choice. The operation began 3 days later, with simultaneous strikes across 4 different systems. The Skarn forces found themselves caught between converging draconic fleets, with no safe retreat routes. Most of their ships were destroyed or captured. The victory at Vorthtile proved that Maya's unconventional approach could work. The rescued civilians were grateful, and the military leaders began to see the value of complex coordinated operations, but the celebrations were short-lived. Intelligence reports indicated that the Skarn attacks were just the beginning. A massive invasion fleet was assembling in the outer systems, preparing for a full-scale assault on draconic territory. Maya called for a full mobilization of the draconic fleets. The response was impressive, as clan after clan pledged their ships and warriors to the defense. But Maya realized that military force alone might not be enough to solve this crisis. Dr. Emma Rodriguez had been working with draconic scholars to analyze captured Skarn communications. The translation work was difficult, but gradually, a picture emerged of the enemy motivations. The Skarn were not attacking out of greed or territorial ambition. Their homeworld was dying from environmental collapse, and they needed new territories to relocate their population. The attacks on draconic space were driven by desperation, not conquest. The Skarn saw no choice but to take what they needed by force. This revelation changed Maya's entire perspective on the conflict. She began to wonder if there was a way to resolve the crisis without massive bloodshed. The Skarn needed new worlds, but there were uninhabited systems that could be terraformed. Maya proposed something that shocked her advisors. Instead of preparing for total war, she wanted to try negotiating with the Skarn. The idea of showing mercy to enemies went against every tradition of draconic culture war. Chief Corthanis was outraged by the suggestion. He argued that weakness would only encourage more attacks. Scholar Theolara supported Maya, but most of the other council members were skeptical about the chances of success. The debate in the council chamber was heated. Some Dragonlords threatened to withdraw their fleets if Maya pursued negotiations. Lord Asgarath remained silent for a long time, before finally speaking in favor of trying diplomacy. First, Maya realized that her greatest challenge might not be defeating the Skarn, but convincing her own people to try a different approach. The draconic culture valued strength and honor. Above all else, showing mercy to enemies was seen as weakness. Soreth shared his thoughts through their bond. He reminded Maya that true strength sometimes meant choosing the harder path. The ancient dragon had lived through the Civil War and had seen how cycles of violence could destroy everything. Maya made her decision. Despite the opposition, she would try to negotiate with the Skarn while keeping the military option available. If talks failed, the draconic fleets would be ready to fight, but she had to try to find a peaceful solution first. Announcement of her decision caused uproar among some factions. Several clan leaders demanded emergency council sessions to challenge her authority. Maya had to use all her political skills to maintain support for her position, but something unexpected happened. The Skarn responded positively to Maya's offer of negotiations. Their Emperor Vrextal agreed to meet on a neutral station to discuss terms. Maya had taken a huge risk, and it appeared to be paying off. The upcoming diplomatic summit would be the real test of Maya's leadership. If she could find a way to resolve the crisis peacefully, it would establish her as a true queen. If the talks failed, the consequences could be catastrophic for everyone involved. Maya prepared for the most important negotiation of her life, knowing that the fate of multiple species hung in the balance. The girl who had saved a wounded dragon was about to try to save entire civilizations from a war that could destroy them. All the neutral station hung in empty space between the territories of 3 different species. Maya arrived aboard the flagship of the Draconic Fleet, accompanied by her advisors and a full diplomatic team. The station itself was a marvel of engineering, built specifically for these kinds of high-level negotiations. Emperor Vrextal of the Skarn hegemony was already waiting when Maya delegation docked. His species looked like armored insects walking upright with multiple arms and compound eyes that missed nothing. Maya had studied recordings of Skarn, but seeing them in person was still unsettling. The first meeting was formal and tense. Both sides brought guards, and the atmosphere was thick with suspicion. Maya wore the simple crown of the Dragon Queen, while Vrextal was covered in the ritual scarification that marked Skarn royalty. Dr. Morgan and translator Dr. Emma Rodriguez helped Maya navigate the complex protocols involved in interspecies diplomacy. Every gesture and word had to be carefully chosen to avoid giving offense or showing weakness. The Skarn Emperor spoke through a translator device that converted his clicking speech into understandable words. Maya was surprised by his intelligence and the depth of his knowledge about galactic politics. This was not the savage warlord she had expected. Vrextal explained the situation facing his people with stark honesty. The Skarn homeworld was becoming uninhabitable due to industrial pollution and resource depletion. They had perhaps 50 years before their civilization would collapse completely. The Emperor had tried diplomatic solutions before turning to military force, but other species had either ignored Skarn requests for help or demanded impossible concessions in exchange for aid. The attacks on Draconic territory were a desperate attempt to secure new worlds. Maya listened carefully to the Emperor's words, while studying his body language through her enhanced senses. The bond with Zorath had given her an ability to read emotions that proved valuable in negotiations. She could sense Vrextal's genuine desperation beneath his proud exterior. When it was her turn to speak, Maya surprised everyone by acknowledging the legitimacy of Skarn concerns. She did not excuse their attacks, but she showed understanding of the impossible position they faced. This unexpected empathy seemed to catch the Emperor off guard. Maya proposed a radical solution. Instead of taking inhabited worlds by force, the Skarn could be helped to terraform uninhabited systems. The Confederation had the technology and resources to make dead worlds livable. The humans could provide additional expertise. Proposal would require a massive commitment from all 3 species, but it offered benefits to everyone. The Skarn would get the new worlds they needed, the dragons would gain valuable allies, and humans would have access to Skarn biotechnology. Vrextal was interested, but skeptical. He had been betrayed before by promises of aid that never materialized. Maya would need to provide concrete guarantees and demonstrate that she had the authority to deliver what she promised. The negotiations continued for days, with both sides working through the complex details of the proposed agreement. The Skarn would need to stop all attacks immediately, While the terraforming projects got underway, multiple systems would need to be surveyed and prepared. Maya found herself mediating between her own advisors, as much as negotiating with the Skarn war chief Corthanis. Still favored military solutions while Scholar Phyalora supported the diplomatic approach. The debates were intense, but Maya managed to keep her coalition together. The breakthrough came when Maya suggested a pilot project transforming a single system to demonstrate that the process would work. Both sides could commit limited resources to test the concept without risking everything on an untried solution. Emperor Vrextel agreed to the pilot project, but insisted on having Skarn engineers involved in every aspect of the work. Maya welcomed their participation, knowing that their biotechnology could actually improve the terraforming process. Preliminary agreement was signed with great ceremony, but Maya knew the real work was just beginning. She would need to convince the various draconic clans to contribute resources to help their former enemies. The political challenges were enormous. Returning to Tysera, Maya faced the most difficult council session of her reign. Some Dragonlords were outraged by the agreement and demanded that she reconsidered. Lord Asgareth argued forcefully that the Skarn could not be trusted. Maya had to use every diplomatic skill she had learned to build support for the peace plan. She pointed out that the alternative was a war that could last for decades and cost millions of lives. The terraforming project offered a way to turn enemies into allies. High Matriarch Ishandra provided crucial support by offering to contribute ships and resources from her own clan. Other matriarchs followed her lead, and gradually Maya built the coalition she needed to move forward. The pilot project began 6 months later, with teams from all three species working together on a barren world. In the neutral zone, the planet had water and basic minerals, but no atmosphere suitable for complex life. Maya visited the project site regularly, marveling at how former enemies were learning to work together. Skarn biotechnology proved invaluable for creating the bacterial foundations of a new ecosystem, while draconic engineering provided the massive scale infrastructure needed. Human expertise in planetary systems helped optimize the process and reduce the time needed for transformation. Dr. Kate Sullivan led the human scientific team, and her reports showed remarkable progress. The transformation of the test world succeeded beyond all expectations. Within 2 years, it had a breathable atmosphere and the beginnings of a complex ecosystem. The Skarn colonists who moved there sent back reports of abundant resources and favorable conditions. News of the success spread quickly throughout the galaxy. Other species began requesting similar assistance with their own environmental problems. Maya found herself at the center of a new kind of diplomacy based on cooperation rather than competition. The formal alliance between humans, dragons and Skarn was signed on the transformed world that had become a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. Maya stood with Emperor Vrextel and President Hayes as they committed their peoples to a shared future. But even as she celebrated this success, Maya was aware that new challenges were emerging. Ships from unknown alien civilizations had been detected at the edge of explored space, drawn by reports of the unprecedented alliance. Maya had learned that her role as Dragon Queen was about more than ruling a single species. She had become a bridge between different peoples and cultures, helping them find common ground. Despite their differences, the warm spot on her forehead where Zorath had first marked her still pulsed with energy, reminding her of how this all began. A simple act of compassion during a storm had led to changes that were reshaping the galaxies. Standing on the balcony of her palace on Tysera, Maya looked up at the stars and wondered what other challenges awaited her. The girl who had saved a dying Wyrm had become a queen, but more importantly, she had become a peacemaker. Zrith landed beside her on the balcony, his great wings folding as he settled into a comfortable position. Through their bond, Maya felt his pride in what she had accomplished, but also his awareness that their greatest adventures still lay ahead. New alien ships were arriving daily, seeking audience with the Dragon Queen who brought peace instead of war. Maya had created something unprecedented in galactic history, an alliance based on mutual aid rather than mutual fear. The future was uncertain, but Maya faced it with confidence born of experience. She had learned that true strength came not from the ability to destroy enemies, but from the wisdom to turn them into friends as the twin sons of Taishara sat behind the crystal spires of the ancient capital Maya, reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Every choice had led to this moment, where she stood as a bridge between worlds and a guardian of peace. The bond with Zoreth pulsed with warmth, and Maya smiled, knowing that whatever challenges came next, she would face them with the wisdom of dragons, the determination of humans, and the hope of all species. Working together, her reign as Dragon Queen had only just begun, but already she had proven that compassion could be stronger than fear and cooperation more powerful than conquest. The girl who saved a Wyrm had become the woman who saved civilizations.